She looked me in the eye, laughed, and said, "You'll never be anything without me." I stood there, holding the letter that would change everything. The first move in a plan she never saw coming. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about how I turned being discarded into domination. It was a Wednesday. I remember because I had just gotten off work early, something I rarely did. I was excited, actually. I thought maybe I'd surprise her, maybe take her out. It had been a while since we'd done anything spontaneous. We used to live for that. Spontaneity. Stupid road trips with no destination, dancing in the kitchen at 2 a.m., cheap wine and bare feet on cold tile. But when I walked through that door, she wasn't dancing, she wasn't smiling, she was packing. 2 suitcases already zipped, one still open on the bed. Her red coat, the one she used to call her adventure jacket, was laid out on top, folded like she wasn't coming back. She didn't look up when I walked in. I remember asking, "Are you going somewhere?" like an idiot, as if this wasn't exactly what it looked like. She sighed, that sigh, the one that always came before something final. "I can't do this anymore," she said, still folding. "I'm tired of pretending." I stood there in the doorway, still holding the coffee I had brought home for her. She always liked it with oat milk and 2 pumps of vanilla. I got it right every time. This time, she didn't even glance at it. I asked why. "Of course I did. You always ask why when you're the one being left." She didn't sugarcoat it. "You don't inspire me anymore." That one hit me like a train. I wasn't abusive. I wasn't cruel. I wasn't unfaithful. But in her eyes, I was something worse. Boring. Predictable. Too safe. She said she felt like she was wasting her prime, that life was passing her by, and she didn't want to wake up one day next to someone who was still chasing stability when she was built for chaos. And then she laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because, I think, deep down she realized how cruel that sounded out loud. I wanted to scream, to beg, to ask her what the hell she meant by prime, as if I was just some milestone she had outgrown. But I didn't. I nodded, told her she didn't have to pretend anymore, and I left the room, because sometimes silence says more than shouting ever could. She left the next morning. No dramatic goodbye, no tears, just the sound of her car backing out of the driveway, and then silence. I sat on the porch for hours, watching the sun crawl across the lawn like time was dragging itself forward out of pity for me. It wasn't just that she left. It was how easily she did it. Like all those years were just something she could fold into a suitcase and drive away from. People always say you don't know what you have until it's gone. But I think she knew exactly what she had. She just didn't want it anymore. And that broke me in a way I didn't know was possible. That was the day she left. But not the day I broke. That came later. And when it did, so did something else. Something colder, sharper, a fire I never knew I had. Because when someone leaves you thinking you're nothing, you either become what they said, or you become the reason they choke on regret. And I chose the latter. They don't tell you what happens after someone walks out. Movies cut to the montage, the glow-up, the gym routine, the makeover, the success. But that's not what it looks like. Not at first. What it really looks like is takeout boxes stacked on your coffee table because cooking feels like too much effort. It's your phone lighting up, and you praying it's them, even though you told yourself you don't care anymore. It's losing hours staring at a wall, trying to remember if you even ate today. That was my life for weeks. No dramatic spiral, just quiet collapse. I still went to work, smiled when I had to, told people I was doing fine. You get good at lying when you're trying to convince yourself to. But inside, everything felt hollow, like someone had scooped out all the color and left me living in grayscale. The nights were the worst. That's when her absence screamed the loudest. I'd roll over and instinctively reach for her, only to find empty sheets, cold, indifferent. I kept a few of her things for a while. Her mug, with the little blue crack in the handle. The red scarf she always wore when it rained. A book she never finished. It made me feel like she might come back. Like maybe, just maybe, she'd realize what she left behind. But she didn't. And every day she didn't was another confirmation that I wasn't worth the return trip. One night, I got drunk enough to type out a message, not to send, just to say what I never said. I hope you're happy. I hope you found whatever it was you were looking for. I hope he gives you the chaos you said you missed. But I also hope you remember who held you when the world felt too loud, who believed in you when no one else did, who stood by you, not because you were exciting, but because you were enough. I didn't send it. I saved it in my notes, still there, buried under grocery lists and random passwords. That was the moment I realized I wasn't mourning her. I was mourning me, the version of me who believed love was enough. And when that version died, I made a choice. I wasn't going to chase her. I wasn't going to beg for closure. I wasn't going to ask to be seen by someone who chose to look away. Instead, I was going to become someone she couldn't ignore, not out of spite, not out of revenge, but out of something deeper, survival. Because sometimes, when someone throws you away, you have to build a version of yourself so unrecognizable that even you wouldn't believe who you used to be. And that version, he was just getting started. They say every storm clears the ground for something new, but they never tell you how long you'll wander before planting the first seed. After the collapse came the silence. And in that silence, something unfamiliar started growing. Intention, not anger, not revenge, focus. I didn't want to be the guy crying over texts never sent anymore. I didn't want to be the ghost of someone else's story. So I started asking myself a dangerous question. What would happen if I stopped surviving and started building? At first, it was small. I cleaned out the apartment, every trace of her. I deleted the old photos, not out of hatred, but because I didn't want to keep time-stamping my grief. I sold the couch we used to argue on, bought a second-hand desk instead. Then, I started writing. At night, when sleep wouldn't come, I wrote business ideas. See, before her, before the mess, I had dreams, big ones. I wanted to create something, build something of my own. But love has a funny way of making you shelf parts of yourself to make room for someone else's expectations. So I folded my ambitions, nice and neat, and shoved them into the back of the closet. Now, I was pulling them back out. I remembered a concept I once scribbled on a napkin, an idea for a software tool that would help small creators automate their growth without hiring a team. Back then, she called it a cute little fantasy, but to me, it was the blueprint for freedom. I dusted it off. I spent nights watching coding tutorials, rereading business books I once loved. During the day, I worked my regular job like a machine, silent, precise, invisible. But at night, I was building my exit, piece by piece. I wasn't loud about it. Didn't post motivational quotes, didn't make dramatic announcements. I just worked quietly, relentlessly. The pain was still there, but now it had a purpose. It wasn't drowning me anymore. It was fuel. I stopped checking her social. I stopped replaying what I could have done differently. Because the truth is, you can't bargain with someone who already cashed out on you. Instead, I built a calendar. Each day had 3 tasks, not 10. Just 3. 3 promises I made to myself and refused to break, no matter how broken I felt. Build, learn, move, build the product. Learn something I didn't know the day before. Move physically, emotionally, forward. Some days, I barely made it out of bed, but I still crossed off those 3. And slowly, that version of me, the one she left behind, started fading. In his place was someone sharper, calmer, more dangerous, not because he hated her, but because he finally remembered who he was before trying to become someone she could tolerate. By month 3, I had a working prototype. By month 5, I had my first client. By month 6, I had investors knocking. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag. Because this wasn't about proving her wrong. It was about proving that I was never the weak one. I just forgot how strong I could be without her shadow dimming my light. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a plan. It was a resurrection. It was a Thursday night when everything finally snapped. Not in a dramatic, door-slamming, screaming match kind of way, but in that eerie, silent way that only happens when something has truly died. The kind of silence that doesn't beg for attention. It just island. I remember standing in the kitchen, reheating leftover lasagna. She walked in, eyes glued to her phone, typing furiously with that slight smirk she didn't even try to hide anymore. "Who you texting?" I asked lightly, trying to keep things casual. She looked up for a split second. "Tara. She's going through stuff." Lie. I nodded and pretended to believe her, but something in her tone, in her posture, in the way she didn't even try to make the lie believable, it told me everything. That was the moment I knew. She wasn't even afraid of being caught anymore, because in her mind, I was already beneath her, a non-threat, an emotional bystander, and that made something inside me click. It wasn't heartbreak I felt. It wasn't jealousy. It was something colder, cleaner, sharper, resolve. That night, I laid awake, staring at the ceiling, piecing together every inconsistency, every comment she made in passing, every late night, girl talk, phone call. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. Because the version of me she had in her head, the weak, naive, hopeless romantic who'd grovel and beg for her to stay, he had to stay alive a little longer. She needed to believe I was still that man, so she'd never see what was coming. The next few days, I studied her. I took mental notes of her schedule, her moods, her tone during phone calls, the timing of her texts. She thought she was living in a rom-com, playing the misunderstood wife, finally finding herself. But in reality, she was living in a psychological chess match, and I was 5 moves ahead. She started getting sloppy. She'd leave her phone face down every time I entered the room, but forget to close her laptop. Her laughter in the other room shifted from fake to real only when I wasn't around. I even caught a glimpse of a hotel confirmation email once, disguised as a work event. It was almost insulting how little she thought of me. But that's what made it so easy to build the plan. The man she was cheating on, he was invisible to her, and that gave me the power of invisibility. I started gathering documents, backing up files, printing receipts, storing copies in cloud accounts she didn't know existed. I made lists of assets, lists of mutual friends, lists of leverage points, not because I wanted to destroy her, but because I refused to let her walk away clean after tearing my life apart. She thought the worst thing I could do was cry. She had no idea that the worst thing I could do was wait. One night, as she scrolled through Instagram next to me in bed, I glanced over and saw a message pop up. A name I didn't recognize, a heart emoji, a "see you Friday" text. She noticed me look. "You're not gonna say anything?" she asked, half smirking. I shrugged. Why would I? She stared at me like she was waiting for a reaction. When she didn't get one, she rolled over and turned out the light. That was the moment she lost the game. She just didn't know it yet. Because you see, you can break a man. You can betray him, humiliate him, even lie to his face, and think you've won. But when that man stops reacting, when he goes quiet, he's not broken. He's building something, and that something is your reckoning. There's a dangerous kind of calm that comes after heartbreak. It doesn't look like rage. It doesn't look like desperation. It looks like precision. Every morning, she kissed me goodbye with those same lips that whispered to another man at night. And I kissed her back, all while memorizing the password she typed into her phone when she thought I wasn't looking. She had no idea. Not that I knew. Not that I was watching. Not that I was building a quiet empire of receipts, files, and contingency plans beneath the surface of our dying marriage. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was building proof. Proof that the man she painted as weak, poor, and pitiful, was smarter than she ever gave him credit for. First, I met with a lawyer, a discreet one who didn't blink when I said I wanted everything to be ready before she even knew what was coming. We built the case like a puzzle. Messages, financial inconsistencies, strange purchases, everything connected. Second, I opened a new bank account, transferred my direct deposits, quietly cut my name from joint credit cards, made sure every bill with my name on it was separated. Third, I called in a favor from an old friend tech guy. He helped me set up a shadow backup system for all our devices. I had access to everything: texts, photos, emails. I didn't even have to snoop. It all came to me. Every flirty message, every hotel reservation, every "I can't wait to see you again," she thought was her little secret. She wasn't just cheating, she was plotting a life without me. A life she thought she could step into while discarding me like some emotional stepping stone. But I wasn't just her husband anymore. I was the architect of her downfall. Meanwhile, I played the part, the good guy, the working husband. I brought home her favorite coffee, asked about her day, smiled when she got dressed up for drinks with the girls. She thought I was a fool, but really, I was handing her the shovel, and she was digging her own grave with it, smiling the whole time. I also started rebuilding myself. I hit the gym again, not for her, but for me. I reconnected with old colleagues, quietly invested in a few ventures I'd been sitting on. I even started writing again, something I hadn't done in years. With every rep, every paragraph, every bank deposit, I felt stronger. She thought I was stagnant, stuck, but I was evolving in silence. It was poetic. Really, while she was busy chasing validation in hotel rooms, I was reclaiming the man I'd forgotten I was. Then came the final piece. Timing. I waited until her guard was completely down, until she felt untouchable, until she started talking to me like I was already gone. "You wouldn't understand," she said one night when I asked about her day. She laughed to herself, sipping wine. "You've always been comfortable with small things." That line, that was the spark. That was the moment I knew it was time. Because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was contempt. She didn't just fall out of love. She thought I was less than. And the beautiful part? I let her believe it. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It doesn't come with screaming matches or broken dishes. The best revenge walks in quietly, dressed in documents, strategy, an unshakable calm, and she never saw it coming. She thought she was playing chess. But I wasn't even on the same board anymore. The morning it all unraveled, she was in the kitchen, barefoot, sipping her overpriced oat milk latte, scrolling through her phone like life was exactly how she wanted it. And in her mind, it was. The house, the comfort, the control. Until I placed the envelope on the table, thick, neatly sealed, my name printed on the front in sharp black ink. She looked at it, then at me. "What's this?" I smiled genuinely, for the first time in a while. "Everything," I said. She opened it, probably expecting a birthday card or some sentimental nonsense I'd written to win her back. Instead, she found a copy of the divorce papers, a detailed breakdown of our assets, already separated. A log of her infidelity, printouts of messages, hotel bookings, even screenshots of her conversations with her friends, mocking my cheap little dreams. She froze. No scream, no dramatic denial, just silence. That's when she knew. This wasn't impulsive. This wasn't emotional. This was surgical. Her hands trembled. She looked at me like I was a stranger. "Wait, you knew?" I nodded. "For a long time." She swallowed hard. "Then why didn't you say anything?" "Because I wanted you to feel safe enough to show me who you really were." That hit her hard. She wasn't just exposed, she was outplayed. She had spent months thinking she was in control, telling herself I was too soft, too simple, too beneath her. But now she realized she'd been living in a story I was writing, and I had just finished the final chapter. She tried to pivot. Of course. Crocodile tears, soft apologies, the desperate "we can work this out" tone. But I'd seen the real her, the version that laughed about me behind my back. The one who rolled her eyes when I talked about my dreams. The one who traded loyalty for temporary ego boosts from men who wouldn't even remember her name 6 months later. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done, and that scared her more than anything. She followed me as I walked toward the door, panic rising. "Where are you going?" "To sign the papers," But I thought, you thought wrong. And with that, I left. No yelling, no chaos, just silence thick and permanent, because in that moment, she realized she hadn't just lost me. She lost her audience, her safety net, her narrative. The aftermath? Brutal for her. She tried to salvage her image with friends and family, told stories of how I changed, how I gave up too fast. But people talk, and screenshots don't lie. The same people who used to believe her started pulling away, not because of me, but because they finally saw her. The mask was off, and underneath wasn't some powerful woman chasing happiness. It was someone who mistook cruelty for strength and underestimated a quiet man with a long memory. Me? I moved into a small place across town. Nothing fancy, but peaceful. Every time I wake up, I feel lighter. Every time I sip my coffee in silence, I remember what real peace feels like. And I don't regret a single thing, because I didn't just walk away. I designed my exit. And that's the kind of closure you don't beg for. You build it. The silence after the storm wasn't empty. It was full of clarity, full of breath, full of the kind of peace you don't even realize you've been craving until it finally wraps around you like a warm blanket on a cold morning. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells. I didn't have to rehearse my words in my head before speaking. Didn't have to gauge her mood before I walked into a room. Didn't have to shrink myself to fit into her fragile sense of superiority. I was free. I rented a modest loft downtown. High ceilings, exposed brick, a single window that poured in sunlight every morning. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine, every inch of it. A space without judgment, without cruelty, without shame, and with that space came healing. I started doing things I'd forgotten I loved. Reading, cooking, running. Before sunrise, I planted herbs in old coffee cans on the windowsill, watched them grow in silence. There's something powerful about growing things, especially when you've spent years in a relationship where everything felt like it was dying. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd slowly stopped seeing because she didn't like them, people who remembered me before I started apologizing for existing. We talked, we laughed. They didn't ask me to explain myself. They just welcomed me back. And slowly, I started to remember who I was. Not her husband, not her emotional punching bag, just me. She, on the other hand, wasn't doing so well. I never went digging for updates, but the information had a way of finding me. Mutual friends, most of whom had always secretly doubted her perfect image, started reaching out. She's saying you ghosted her. She thought you were broke? Man, she's spiraling. Apparently, she hadn't expected the tables to turn. She tried to play the victim online, but it backfired. I never posted anything, just one quiet comment with a screenshot. One where she texted a friend, "I'm so tired of pretending to love a man with a cheap job and a cheaper soul." That was all it took. The comments turned against her. Wow. That's cold. He supported you, and this is how you talk about him. No wonder he left. Her carefully constructed narrative collapsed under the weight of her own words. She moved back in with her mother, tried to get a lawyer to dig into my finances, only to realize everything was protected. Tried to contact my HR. Didn't know I had already resigned. Tried to call me. I didn't answer because there was nothing left to say. Months later, she sent one message. Just one. "Do you ever think we gave up too soon?" I stared at it for a long time, then typed, "Number, I think you gave up the moment you decided I wasn't worth the truth." And I blocked her. No theatrics, no second chances, just a clean final break. And that's when I realized something. Revenge doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be messy. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is silence, the kind that echoes in their mind every time they remember what they lost, every time they see you thriving, and know they're no longer welcome in the world you rebuilt without them. It happened on a Wednesday, a regular, boring Wednesday. I was sipping coffee in my loft, answering email. When the notification popped up, Margie has sent you a connection request on LinkedIn. Margie, her mother, the same woman who once told me I'd never amount to anything. The same woman who toasted to her daughter's freedom after the divorce. Right there at the kitchen table, wine in one hand, venom in the other. Now she was trying to connect with me on a professional network. Not only that, she was endorsing my project management skills. I stared at the screen, blinking. Was this real? And then the message came in. Didn't realize how talented you were. Hope you're doing well. I nearly dropped my mug. This woman, who used to mock my career, who said I was just a glorified secretary, was now hoping I was doing well? It would have been laughable if it weren't so poetic. I didn't respond, didn't reply with a witty comeback, didn't gloat. I just clicked decline, then block. Simple, clean, done. See, when the tables turn, some people don't apologize. They just get quieter. They don't own their cruelty. They just hope you've forgotten it. But I hadn't. Not because I was holding on to bitterness, but because I remembered who I was the entire time they were trying to convince me I was nothing. I wasn't bitter. I was awake. A few days later, I ran into someone at a networking event. He was a friend of a friend, one of those guys who used to smirk at me when I talked about my startup idea back in the day. "You still doing that little business thing?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Just closed Series B. At $18 million valuation." His smirk disappeared. Just like that. People will call your dream little until it's too big to ignore. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but life has a sense of irony. About a month later, I saw her, my ex. She was walking into a cafe as I was walking out. We locked eyes for half a second. She looked different, not older, not sad, just smaller, like the world no longer revolved around her, like she had finally learned what it meant to be ignored. She didn't speak, neither did I. We just passed each other, two people with too much history and nothing left to say, and in that moment, I felt nothing, not anger, not pity, just peace, because I knew she wasn't looking at the man she left. She was looking at the man she never really saw in the first place. And that's the real twist, isn't it? They always think you'll fall apart without them. They never expect you to become someone they'll never be able to reach again. That day, I didn't walk away with swagger. I didn't look back. I just walked forward into a life that didn't need her in it. A life I built not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Here's what nobody tells you when you're broken. You don't need to scream to be heard. You don't need to get even to feel powerful. You don't need to prove your worth to someone who is committed to never seeing it. The most savage revenge isn't fire. It's silence. It's thriving so hard they choke every time they try to say your name. I used to think closure came from confrontation, from saying everything you've bottled up, from finally being seen and heard by the one who hurt you. But that's not how it works. Closure isn't about them. It's about reclaiming your narrative and realizing they were just a chapter, not your whole story. Let me tell you something I've learned. People who only loved the version of you that made them feel bigger never really loved you. They loved control. They loved the reflection of themselves in your loyalty. And when you stopped shrinking for them, that's when they left. But that's also when you started growing. So many people stay stuck trying to win back someone who was never rooting for them to begin with. They confuse familiarity with love, comfort with connection. But real love doesn't belittle. Real love doesn't measure your value by your paycheck, your title, or how well you fit into someone else's fantasy. Real love is loud in loyalty and quiet in pride. And if they couldn't handle your growth, they never deserved your roots. There's this quote I read once: "Don't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm." I used to think sacrifice was noble, but now I know if someone demands you dim your light just so they can shine, they're not your partner, they're your shadow. And here's the final cut, the sharpest truth of all. You never owed them revenge. You owed yourself peace. You owed yourself nights without crying into your pillow, mornings without bracing for insults disguised as jokes, days where you walk tall, not flinching at every reminder of your past. They wanted you to believe that without them, you'd be nothing. So go ahead, become everything. Let your silence be a siren. Let your progress be the punchline. Let your healing be the heartbreak they never saw coming. Because in the end, they didn't break you, they revealed you. And now, you owe them nothing, except, maybe, the sound of your footsteps walking away, toward a future so bright they have to squint just to imagine it. So tell me, have you ever been underestimated, cast aside by someone who thought they could do better, only to realize too late that you were the real prize? If you felt this story in your chest, if it stirred something deep, you're not alone, because the truth is, we've all been someone's backup plan, someone's emotional punching bag, someone they only appreciated after we walked away. But here's the difference now. You're not that person anymore. You're not the one begging for crumbs of affection. You're not explaining your worth to people who were too small to recognize it. You're building, you're healing, you're growing into the kind of person they could never have handled. When people walk out of your life, because they assume they can do better, don't try to convince them to stay. Let them go. Let them chase illusions. Let them learn the hard way what loyalty, depth, and love really meant. Because when they come back, and they always try to come back, you'll be too far ahead to even hear them knocking. That's the ultimate plot twist. That's the revenge that echoes. So here's what I want from you. If you've ever been betrayed, abandoned, or written off, drop your story in the comments. I want to hear about your glow-up, your rebound, your silent revenge. Tell us how you rose, how you refused to stay small just to fit in their tiny little world. I read every single one, because this channel isn't just for stories, it's for warriors, for the underestimated, the uncelebrated, the ones who chose peace over pettiness and still came out on top. If this story hit you hard, hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that twist the knife and heal the soul. Share this with someone who needs to hear. They're not broken. They're becoming dangerous. Until next time, stay grounded. Stay silent. Stay unforgettable. Because the loudest revenge is thriving.